Hey, welcome to Audio Slang. My name is Marlon. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to import stems into Ableton properly so you don't run into any issues along the way. This video is for people who are trying to collaborate with others who don't necessarily work in Ableton and they're sending you tracks, or you're beginning to mix in Ableton and you're having issues during your initial import and playback. Let's jump right in and I'll show you how it all works. All right, so we have a fresh Ableton session open and we're ready to start importing stems. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna save the session, make sure that we create a session folder for it. Just gonna name it random mixing session. And this is really important because if you import your stems and start mixing before saving, at least you'll start to accumulate backups so you can go back and get to a place that you were at. I'd say, make sure that you're saving every 5 minutes or after any major changes, but, just to ensure that we do have a session started, save it right away. Next thing, we're gonna go into our settings. So you can go to your live dropdown to preferences or just press Command comma and open it up. Next, we're gonna look at the record, warp, and launch settings. And the first thing we're going to look at is auto warp long samples. This has to be off. No matter what, if you're importing stems, turn this off. You do not want to warp anything coming into the session. Ableton will automatically detect transients on each of your tracks and push the start and end points for those individual stems. So you don't want that. You want all the tracks to be stacked up and aligned in accordance with how they were exported. Next things you want to look at, especially if you are going to be changing tempo or anything like that, is your default warp mode. Once you do warp all of your stems in Ableton, let's say for a tempo change, you don't want to be doing anything on here besides complex. Each of these have their own individual reasons for being a warp method, but complex is good for basically anything. So definitely gonna just leave that on complex for when we do wanna warp if we're changing tempo. Next, create fades on clip edges. I always have this off. This doesn't make sense in any context that I can think of where I would want to automatically create fades on my clip edges, especially because I work with a lot of drums. And usually the transient will start right at the beginning of the sample. So if there's a fade there, I won't be getting the attack of the transients. There's going to be a little bit of a fade on each clip. This is always going to be off. I'm sure there's a context where you would keep that on, but I haven't ran into any recently. Next, we want to check our bit depth. Bit depth is going to be, what the stems were sent as. So if they were sent as, 16-bit, put it to 16-bit. If they were sent at 32-bit, set it to 32-bit. I usually like to keep mine in 32 just so I keep maximum amount of headroom and just the maximum file size so that we can get each and every detail of our audio correct. The last thing is just make sure your in-out sample rate is exactly the same as the stems that you're receiving as well, just so that you don't have to convert or anything like that. That's about it. As far as, importing stems go, these are the settings that you need to make sure you're working with in order to import them properly. So now that we're done with the settings, we're going to go check out our stems. First thing that I like to do, before I, import my stems is check what the BPM is. We could set the BPM before importing stems, just so that everything lines up and we have everything on the grid exactly as it was exported at. So this session is at 32-bit, 48K, 128 BPM, and it gives me the key of the song as well, just so that if I am using like an auto tune or if I'm tuning a drum to make sure it, comes out in the song properly, I know exactly what the key is and I could set all these parameters to make sure that it's in line with what the song is at. I mean, even if it changes keys, we could put multiple keys here. But as long as we have a basis as to where we're starting, this is always great to have. So if you're getting stems from somebody, make sure they're sending you all the information you need in order to start mixing. All right, so 128 BPM, we're gonna go into Ableton, type in 128. That's not 128. And we're ready to start dragging stuff in. So we're gonna open the folder, and I'm gonna actually just get rid of all these Ableton warping files. All right, so we're gonna select all our stems and we're gonna drag it right into Ableton. Now, before I let go of the stems, I'm actually holding it with my left click. I'm gonna hold Command. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna stack all the clips exactly right on top of each other, so we could start each track on a point that we choose. So let's say, you know, you wanna leave a little bit of room in the front just for 0 fade in, you can do that. So I'm gonna import that, and perfect. Now we have each and every stem stacked on top of each other exactly where they start, right? So all these stems seem to start in the same place. Once we get a good visualization of each audio file, we'll be able to see everything's lining up properly. We could also make sure that everything's pulled out to the left and right, just to make sure we're getting each and everything that we need from each of these stems. All right, so this all looks good. Everything looks lined up. Looks like, you know, we have a bunch of different sections here. Looks like everything is on the grid. So if I actually pulled all the stems over, we can see that, you know, the first, maybe this is an intro, it's 8 bars long because we're stopping at, you know, the 9th bar here, and here's where this starts. So we know that we got the tempo correct. And then once that's done, if you are going to be changing or warping anything, I'd say go right ahead, select all the clips, and just hit warp on them. In order to change your mode, if you only see drop audio effects here, you could actually click Shift Tab, and it'll bring up your sample mode, and it'll show you what's the same with all of these samples, right? So I'm going to click warp, and then I should be good. So this way, you know, if we were tuning it up, tuning it down, or if we're changing the tempo of the song, everything's gonna stay in line on the grid. So like if I change this to 120 now, it doesn't matter. The samples don't move, only the time does, right? And wow, I think that's it. You know, if it were me, I'd now start organizing the session, you know, coloring all my tracks, and making sure that everything is, you know, natural and is where it's supposed to be. One thing that I would like to say, and this actually happened to me recently, is listen to the track before you start mixing or before you start collaborating. There might be something off with it. Like, let's say, you know, the producer, they exported the session, but there was a filter on the master and it was on the entire time and it wasn't meant to be. You have to listen for those things to make sure that you're getting exactly what you think you're getting as far as your mixing session. If something sounds off, make sure you say something. Don't just assume that that's what they wanted, you know? And if you ask and that's what they wanted, then great. You have no issue with it. You could start and, you know, go ahead with your collaboration or mixing session. But that's it. Just a fair warning. And don't be afraid to talk to the people who are sending you stems to make sure that you're getting exactly what they wanted you to get. All right, that's it for me. I hope you guys learned something today. Please comment with any questions you might have on the topic, and let us know what you want to see in the future. All right, until next time, talk to you later.